terms of the giant panda's classification, it belongs to the animal kingdom. Its phylum is Chordata, which refers to vertebrates. Its class is Mammalia, and order is Carnivora. Its family is Uridaceae, which is also included with most bears. Its genus is Allarpod, and its species is Allarpoda melenluca. Weighing around 165 to 353 pounds as an adult is a widely known species around the world that has not only been seen in cartoons such as Kung Fu Panda, but also holds a very significant role in the country of China. Giant pandas live in temperate, broadleaf, and mixed forests in a now small area of southern western China along the Tibetan Plateau. These pandas can grow up to 4 feet in length and have very distinctive black and white markings. All giant pandas possess these specific markings, with black patches around their eyes, black ears, and a white head, making it difficult to tell them apart. Giant pandas also have very thick and coarse, oily fur in order for them to keep warm within the cool and moist climate of their mountain forest habitat. Giant pandas have lived for centuries in this mountain forest habitat of southwestern China at elevations of around 5,000 to 11,000 feet. These remote forests are prone to dense mist, rain, and snow in the winter. Giant pandas have acquired a heritability to perform molting differently than other animals. Molting is a process in which animals grow extra fur in the late summer months or fall so that they are able to keep warm during the winter months, and they shed this acquired fur in the spring months in order to cool down for the summer months. This process requires a lot of energy, which poses as a problem for giant pandas due to their rigid diet of just bamboo. That being said, pandas have acquired the ability to undergo a continuous cycle of molting that does not hinder their energy abilities. Giant pandas are known for their diet, which consists of high-fiber bamboo leaves, stems, and shoots in the summer and spring months. These large pandas spend approximately 14 hours a day consuming around 26 to 84 pounds of bamboo to obtain nutrients. Their diet has allowed them to develop unique morphological characteristics such as powerful jaws and teeth for cutting through thick bamboo shoots, an elongated foregut and hindgut in order for them to digest faster due to their large consumption of bamboo, which is normally an indigestible plant polysaccharide. One of their most significant evolutionary traits is their enlarged radial sesamoid, or extra thumb. This is recognized by referring back to the giant pandas order group Carnivora, which consists mostly of carnivorous animals. In 1964, autonomous D. Dwight Davis argued that the giant panda was a bear that adapted to eating bamboo. Therefore, their opposable thumb was due to their diet. Giant pandas now have a thumb pad that can be pressed against the pad of their palm for the purpose of grasping bamboo while eating it. This indicates that the selective advantage was presented over time so that giant pandas could eat with ease. Threats of giant pandas include climate change, human development, fractionalization of a habitat, bamboo's inability to grow, low reproduction rates, infectious disease, logging, and poaching. As a part of the Endangered Species Act, the United States Fish and Wildlife Service declared giant pandas as an endangered species on January 23, 1984, with 1,114 pandas living in the wild. As time went on, re-evaluations determined that the giant panda was still a part of the endangered species list. After 30 years, in 2014, the International Union of Conservation Red List showed an 17% rise in the population, which showed as well that there were 1,864 pandas now living in the wild. This population rise caused the IUCN's Red List to consider pandas, quote, vulnerable on September 4, 2016. This is the last evaluation of the species to date, so giant pandas as of now are classified as, quote, vulnerable. Even though over 50 years of conservation efforts have been put into action to save this species, categorizing the species as vulnerable is seen by many scientists and conservationists as a bad thing. They explain that people who support it and work towards conservation efforts could become more complacent, allowing pandas to move the opposite direction of progress. This premature decision by the IUCN came as great news, but highlighted in an article by the New York Times a year after this news was released in 2017, a new problem was presented. Climate change and other factors could potentially devastate the panda's habitat, which would yield a population rise of pandas as a whole. Bamboo is the sole item in a giant panda's diet, but is also in many ways their main source of survival overall. It is estimated that the omnivorous giant panda began eating bamboo 7 million years ago. In their habitat, bamboo carpets the forest floor and grows amongst older trees. These trees normally serve as a perfect shelter for mother giant pandas to breed their young. However, due to deforestation, many mothers have limited space to give birth in their ideal and essential habitats. As well as this, studies predict that due to rising temperatures as a result of climate change, most of bamboo, which makes up the prime habitat for giant pandas, could be wiped out in the next century. In addition, bamboo is also known to have an unusually low reproduction rate, with one species out of 25 others flowering and producing every 30 to 35 years. This slow growth rate is detrimental to the species as climate change worsens. Giant pandas for centuries have lived in low elevations where food sources grow. However, due to human development, it has forced them to be pushed into higher mountain areas at a higher elevation rate. Bamboo's issues with growth in general could make it especially harder for the plant to grow at higher elevations, thus eliminating the bear's essential to survive. Pandas are now only living within elevations higher than the land that is occupied by farmers performing productive agriculture. Giant pandas have a heavy reliance on spatial memory as well, which causes them to have difficulty when their food sources are abruptly changed or moved. This information presents that despite not being currently endangered and categorized as, quote, vulnerable, the loss of their main form of survival due to climate change and rising temperatures, as well as human development, could quickly reverse their ranking on the red list. Also, giant pandas are slowly moving animals who are on a constant hunt for food because they do not hibernate like other bears. They are seen to have a movement range of about 4.7 kilometers per day, which also poses a huge issue when searching for a food source that soon may be much harder to find. Pandas have a low reproduction rate, raising another issue in terms of conservation efforts. Female giant pandas have low reproduction rates in general, without factoring in environmental challenges. Females only ovulate 2 out of the 3 days in a year, while also breeding only once a year in the spring months. When considering environmental obstacles, mating issues arise. Similar to the issue of relocation due to the lack of bamboo in certain areas, giant pandas struggle to find a mate during mating season because of relocation. This causes birth rates to plummet, thus contributing to the giant panda's low reproduction rate. In terms of pandas in captivity, there are currently 600 panda centers, zoos, nature reserves, and wildlife parks around the world. There are currently 3 zoos in the United States with giant pandas: Memphis, Atlanta, and Washington, D.C. Internationally, giant pandas can be found in countries such as Australia, Canada, Japan, Finland, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Thailand, Taiwan, Mexico, France, Singapore, Spain, Austria, Belgium, Russia, and the United Kingdom. In efforts to protect the giant panda, zoos outside of the United States must actually lease the animals from the Chinese government, and the money is used to further protect and preserve these wild pandas. Zoos have found it difficult to breed giant pandas in captivity. The reason for this, in addition to their low reproduction rate, is that when separating cubs from their mothers at a young age from the wild may harm their social development. This could address why so many captive giant pandas fail to breed. Breeding centers in China, however, in recent years have improved due to using both mating and artificial insemination. Specifically, the Wulong Panda Center has a 90% survival rate with captive-born cubs due to using a special method where it takes twin pandas away from their mother and lets them spend individual time with them. Infectious disease is another main factor to consider when discussing giant panda conservation efforts. Disease caused by parasites is very common in giant pandas, with an emphasis on the intestinal nematode. I'm so sorry, I don't know how to say this, but Basiliscaris scahydriae, which is the leading cause of death for wild populations. This infectious disease infects a giant panda when it enters its fecal-oral route. The parasite then migrates through the tissues of the host, causing significant tissue damage and the scarring of the intestinal and lung walls. Despite being most common in wild populations, it also affects those in captivity. There is no cure for this infectious disease. However, in captivity, transmission prevention is dependent on hygiene, housing, and management practices. Development in China has added to the threat of giant pandas significantly. Despite China's conservation efforts, agriculture, logging, poaching, pollution, and residential and commercial development are all factors of human development that have caused pandas to move to higher altitudes. These factors contribute to blocking giant pandas from obtaining bamboo that is not being affected by rising temperatures and other mates during mating season. Giant pandas are seen as a national symbol for the people of China. Since the time of China's Han Dynasty, pandas roamed the gardens of emperors and were believed to have magical powers. Due to its cultural significance to the people of China, the Chinese government has worked extremely hard with efforts to protect the giant panda from extinction. In the 1940s, the Chinese government began its conservation efforts and set aside, quote, safe areas or natural reserves where the giant panda would be protected. In the 1960s, China called upon its provinces to set aside safe areas as well. Today, there are 40 panda reserves across southwestern China. These pandas and nature reserves also conduct scientific research to monitor and study the panda's behavior and breeding efforts. In 1998, China also put a ban on logging and poaching, which is very detrimental to a giant panda's habitat. The legislation and effort put forth by China is one of the reasons why the population has been able to rise over the years. Despite the efforts, though, climate change still poses as a massive threat to the species. In addition to the efforts by the Chinese government for conservation and scientific research on breeding, vocalization, the bamboo genome, donations and efforts from all around the globe are also contributing to the aid of giant pandas. Artificial dens are being created for mother giant pandas to breed in due to the deforestation of older trees. As well as this, artificial corridors and bridges are also being put into place so that they are able to move from different locations with their habitat without encountering human civilization. In conclusion, we see that despite all human effort to help the giant panda succeed as it moves away from being endangered, there are many other factors that could bring them towards extinction much quicker than many can imagine. So, even though they seem to be okay now and are classified as, quote, vulnerable, due to a lack of food and shelter because of climate change, these bears are still in need just as much attention as any other endangered animal in our world today.